Lord, the one and only, the inimitable Arvel. What's going on, brother?
Hey, good to be with you, Jason.
Oh
I've
man, it's,
seen your content for quite a while and I've been impressed. You have a lot of critics, and I really don't understand it because I don't see anything objectionable at all. You know?
well, I appreciate that. Thank you very much. And one of the things I think probably where we are simpatico is that we're both focused on our people. How can we improve the lives of our people? How can we end our victimization? How can we establish, in this case, what you're doing that I've peeked into and have been impressed with, setting up these towns, these communities, these places where, and it can happen anywhere, and you're going to get into that. We'll get into that a little bit here. It can happen anywhere. And from the video, I saw a bunch of healthy, normal white people, happy white people, proud white people, productive white people. And that is the kind of thing that warms my heart. That's the kind of thing that I think we need to be doing. And so I was very impressed with what I've seen so far of your work. And it's a great pleasure to meet you. And I'm glad we have some crossover folks from both communities and excited about the work that we're both doing. And so as soon as I heard about this and you reached out, I was like, heck yeah, this is like a marriage made in heaven. So please, if you will, introduce yourself to folks and what you do and what you're aiming to do, just sort of the general, because then I would like to take a little bit of a step back and how did Arvel get into all this? Where did the inspiration come from? What motivated you? But please take the mic, brother.
Yeah, so my name is Eric. My screen name, Arval, is my Norwegian family name before they
Okay.
changed it, coming here. So I decided to take the moniker just for a little bit of anonymity. That was back in, I guess, 2017, 2018, when things were starting to heat up. But I've been around in these spaces. Originally, I just went by my actual name, Eric Orwell. And primarily, I was doing philosophy content, and I kind of got red pilled by my own comment section. I had racial sentiments, but didn't really know how to express them or think deeply about them. And people just kept hitting me with these arguments. And I love a good argument. And,
Yeah.
the truth speaks for itself. And so I was persuaded. And over the last several years, I've become more explicit in my advocacy for white identity. It's something that takes courage. And, you've been out there courageously standing for our people and not in a way that tears others down. And I think that's really a mistake that too many people in our circles fall into. It's easier to destroy than it is to build up,
Oh my gosh.
Um,
So
yeah.
true. So it was back in, I guess, 2017 is when you got started. And what were you really covering then? You said you weren't terribly racially conscious at that time. Where were you? Where was your focus at that time?
Well, prior to then, I started my YouTube channel back in 2011. So I was doing philosophy content, and I would bring up issues related to race. But from 2017 onward, I just embraced more openly white identitarianism, nationalism, if you want to call it that. And in the last 3 years, especially, I've taken this turn towards advocating for white intentional communities. I've actually always believed it was the only viable political solution for our people, just because what really are the alternatives? We take over the government. Okay, you're up against trillionaires. You're up against
Yes,
old,
yes.
money that's been established for generations. You're up against a government that could crush you very easily. They have this whole legal apparatus set up specifically to prevent our flourishing. So you really don't stand a chance just directly confronting them. However, we do have a robust substrate underneath this kind of parasitical elite that's currently taken charge of our societies. We have Western law, we have constitutional law, we have rights, we have unalienable rights given to us by our creator, according to the founders of our social order. And so, notwithstanding the parasitism, notwithstanding the corruption of existing elites, the basic right to freedom of expression, freedom of association is enshrined in our Constitution, and it's something that we can defend if we know how to approach it correctly. Things like the Fair Housing Act, you would think would make white intentional communities impossible. But there are actually set-asides, even in the Fair Housing Act, for intentional communities under private associations. So it takes legal research. It takes digging into exactly what has happened to our laws in the last 70, 80 years that makes it difficult. But there are legal pathways. So specifically what we do, we have a private association that is Return to the Land. You can join that without coming down, moving to Arkansas and, setting up camp on the land. But then under that association, we have a company that owns our land. And so we don't buy and sell land, which would be discriminatory under the Fair Housing Act. We buy and sell shares in the company that owns the land. It's the same thing actually that Orania does. So Orania in South Africa, they don't own their lots of land. They own shares in the Orania company. It's like I said, we have this Western legal framework underlying everything, and the right to contract is basically sacrosanct. And so if you know how to form corporations and establish contract correctly, well, you can have a secure basis for white intentional community, and that's what we've built.
Yeah, this is a subject actually that I'll have to look back and see if I can find there was a while there that I was giving some speeches talking about how we could set up what you're calling white intentional communities. You actually did it. Thank God that you're actually doing it, because I got out there and I remember I did a bunch of research back then, and I found probably some of the material that you've looked across, things like brotherhoods and the like, that you can establish, and you can establish membership. And all of that, as you're mentioning now, is enshrined in the law and would require anti-whites to have to breach those laws, reinterpret those laws, have a double standards in the application of those laws. Because I remember when I was giving those speeches, I had researched these. There were Jewish communities in New York, New Jersey, and there were a couple other groups as well that I cited that had very successfully done this. They exclude really effectively everyone that they don't want. And there are entire apartment complexes in New York and New Jersey. I assume by this point there are also Indian ones and also Chinese ones, and we can probably find the same thing in Canada being done with Indian and Chinese people. And it's this proximity and this focus on ourselves and this working together that really is the basis of a people. When we come together physically, as you're talking about here, and very excitingly talking about physically coming together, we're taking care of each other. Our individual well-being is by way of our group's well-being. And another thing that's the basis of a peoplehood. All of the rest of it is the accoutrements. All of the rest is just, the clothes we wear, music we listen to, etc. But that's really the basis of peoplehood. That's where the successful strategy of peoplehood comes from, which is being effectively inflicted on us. So I'm very excited about that. I want to ask you, and I'm very excited about this as well. A lot of time that people get into this mindset and they think, okay, let's build a community somewhere. They get this idea that there's going to be kind of a one and done. And I get the impression from you that, no, this can be all different places. It can be everywhere. I guess technically, we'll get into maybe this in a moment. Maybe you could just speak to it as well. What happens, or is there a possibility that a community could, if and when they are infringed upon, just collectively pick up and go build that community someplace else as things perhaps worsen in some areas? But just to get started there, explain that this isn't a one and done. This isn't a citadel. We're not building a castle somewhere that can't be breached. But this can happen many different places.
Yeah, absolutely. One isolated community would not solve our systemic issues. So we actually have 3 different groups right now under RTTL assembling to form new communities. One in Arkansas as well, not too far from Community 1, and then one in Appalachia and one in the Pacific Northwest. And there are hundreds of members in RTTL. Many of them want to set up shop, in their own local areas, and that's very understandable. But I think we do have to accept that right now we don't have the number of people necessary who are willing to really act on their beliefs. These are radical beliefs, and actually changing your lifestyle and making some sacrifices and putting yourself at risk, it's daunting. And it's understandable that a lot of people aren't willing to actually make that concrete change in their lives. So the number of people that are willing to pack up and move is relatively small, but it's still enough that we can acquire very high quality real estate, as a byproduct of buying this land in Arkansas. Now I have land that's far higher quality land than I would have been able to acquire myself. When you buy a large tract of land, it has features like, a creek, a spring, and our land has both of those. And we're looking at potentially acquiring riverfront property in the near future. So there are real tangible, concrete, immediate benefits to working with the few number of our people who are willing to pack up and move and do something radical. But yeah, absolutely, we want to scale this. The whole purpose of the PMA is to facilitate new communities forming, doing it in a way that is legally sound, that is fair to our members, and where there's some quality control. Because anyone can just kind of try to do this in their backyard, and people have done this, in fact, where one person owns all the land and they get people to move down, and effectively they get others to develop their real estate for free, and the others have no rights to their own property. And that's, I think, part of just basic human dignity. We should have a stake in what we're doing. It shouldn't all be on one person, one individual. We should corporatize. We should form one body and have a common interest in a shared endeavor. So we want to facilitate that. And ultimately, I would like, once this is very well established, and we still have a lot more legal research to do. I think we found the basic framework that works, and we've had multiple lawyers look at it. But there are specialized areas of the law that really we have to nail down every detail. So we're spending thousands of dollars consulting with specialized lawyers in real estate law, in securities law, things you wouldn't even necessarily expect, discrimination law, obviously. We have a fundraiser going for that because it's very expensive, and no one else is doing this research that really needs to be done. But once that framework is sound, what we'd like to do is basically expand this model in the general population and start marketing to average white people. As conditions deteriorate, more and more of our people who aren't necessarily online all the time learning these talking points will just intuitively understand the situation and realize what has to be done. And so we want to be there ready to give them those solutions.
This is, I really like, the trajectory at which you begin a thing really will determine, in big part, of course, in attendant to the sort of guiding principles and how flexible they are moving forward. But that trajectory, where you get started and what you intend to do, is critically important. And so I really like, you're definitely speaking my language when you're talking about a success strategy that is replicable and scalable all over the place. That's exactly what, and a big part of that, though, a lot of people who they don't have the processing power really to understand, is that, the social domain is always shifting. It's dynamic. There are always going to be new challenges and new opportunities. So we need flexible ideas, flexible strategies, and flexible people at the helm to be able to realize those opportunities and overcome those changing circumstances, those changing challenges. So replicable and scalable really speak to me. The other thing I think, and it's very important that you mentioned there, is this threshold for actually getting started. A lot of people like to talk. A lot of people like to get online and be anonymous. And a lot of people like to give advice about what needs to be done, what should be done. And then they don't actually do anything. And in my experience of 3 decades in service to white well-being, that's the vast majority of people. And perhaps it speaks negatively to where we have sort of fallen as a consequence of our ingenuity and our intelligence, the ability to make things simple and easy and push button, and therefore more of us are not doers. So what kind of challenges, I guess, with this regard, and what kind of steps have you taken to find the right kind of people? And have you ever tried, or is there any process here for trying to take non-starters, those people who are just pedaling without a chain, and transition them into something real, something productive?
That is the goal. Luckily, the people who have been applying are generally very high quality people. We do have standards. I mean, some of the major questions we ask in the interview, obviously, do you have non-European heritage? And a certain number of people, it's really shocking the number of people who have like a non-white spouse or some situation like that who still want to be admitted into RTTL. But that's a obvious one. A criminal record, we do criminal background checks. So some of those basic things that any organization really should be doing in terms of vetting. But also we ask, are you currently employed? Are you in education, training, things of that nature? Can you maintain a conversation? Yeah.
Yes.
So we do talk to everyone who joins. It's generally not that extensive. It's a 15-minute interview. And the requirements for actually being a member of RTTL at the PMA level aren't super great. You can show up for events, you can participate in the discussion online, you can network with other people interested in forming communities. Where the rubber really hits the road is at the LLC level, the company that actually owns our land. To buy into that company, it's not just a phone call. You come down, you stay a few days, we talk to you extensively, we get to know you. And typically those who actually make it that far already are very well aligned. I think it's actually a beautiful thing about the prosperity that we're living under, despite its downfalls, that now we have the opportunity to kind of self-sort into very like-minded collectives. And that's really never been available before. So I've found a degree of connectedness with the average person who comes down to visit that I would rarely encounter in my everyday life. It's similar to attending AmRen or something of that nature. Maybe even to a greater degree, because there's a prospect of a future in community with the people who show up. So we've gotten very lucky. We do some of those basic, obvious things for screening. But I think really the people who are willing to show up are selecting for themselves, that they've chosen this path and are willing to struggle. I do like seeing young guys show up who don't have the skills and want to learn construction. That's a lot of people. We have a lot of construction work available. Members who have families are building homes for themselves, they're building cabins, and they need to hire workers to do a lot of that. And so young guys often show up and camp out of their truck or in a tent on our land, and they work, in the Arkansas summers, which is not an easy task. And they learn these skills. And we've got a nice little, construction crew growing and going that we would like to formalize better and have like more of a training program and collective housing. I mean, we're really just getting started. We're a year and a half in. We started with absolutely undeveloped land. So there was zero infrastructure. Everything there was built by us. And we pretty much only hire inside, except for things like, drilling wells, bulldozers. We don't have that equipment. But yeah, that is one element that I've been thinking more and more about lately. Like, how can we provide a training program for young men to become, the adults and the fathers that we really need?
Amen to that. I mean, making, quite honestly, men out of the boys of our race. Setting that standard up front, I think you're doing a brilliant thing with setting a standard up so that it's really self-selecting. So the burden isn't as great on you and those who are with you to identify who might be a bad apple, who might be, just by having a stance that you have to be a doer. You're going to be working. You're going to be participating. This is not just talking. Just that alone is going to cause a lot of people to self-select their way right out of it. And that was my experience when I got to talk about this kind of an idea years back, was that these older guys that had money, they like to talk about World War II. And they are, I mean, compared to people like us, you could say, they're rich, they're, probably upper middle class somewhere. But when the rubber meets the road about what are you actually going to do? Are you going to get involved? Are you going to make this happen? They want to retire to their easy chair, give some more Monday morning quarterbacking about what should be done or the way it should be done. But you're doing the yeoman's work, and big salute to you and everybody who is assisting you in that. Have you had any situation, or have you planned for, do you have any ideas about potentially, and this is just the norm of dealing with people and communities, dealing with like internal conflict in such a community, families becoming at odds with each other or anything like that? Have given any consideration to that?
Yeah, you can read our articles of association for the PMA or our operating agreement for the LLC, which spells out our policies on noise ordinances and things that HOAs would typically be responsible for. And we do have mediation procedures when conflicts arise. So far, it's been pretty effective. Really, it's kids that are difficult because they don't necessarily understand the whole picture. Like, all the adults are pretty committed that we have to get along for the sake of the greater good. Kids, though, I mean, you're going to have drama with kids. So we haven't luckily encountered any really severe issues with the adults who have shown up, and no severe issues with the kids either. It's been relatively peaceful, luckily. But yeah, we have given a lot of thought into how is someone removed from the community if, God forbid, that's necessary. So if someone is a habitual drug user or an open alcoholic or is just behaving in a way that's detrimental to our culture, and there is general consensus that that is the case, we would first issue a warning. And if the behavior persists and things are not corrected, ultimately we would vote to expel that member from the LLC, and they wouldn't just be out of all of their investment. The LLC or PMA members would have an obligation to buy their share at a fair market value. So we would bring in an outside assessor to look at their property, and compensate them fairly. So yeah, we've given a lot of thought to it, luckily, and I hope that continues to be the case. We just haven't had to actually oust someone that was already a member. We have turned people down who actually made the trek out to show up and who were hopeful of joining. And it's always, it's a difficult thing to,
Right.
we talk about discrimination, but to actually have to discriminate against someone is a really tough thing. But we do it. So.
Yeah. I mean, that was one of the things that over the years I thought about communities, these intentional communities, like what you're talking about here. And I thought that could be an area that could be challenging, especially it's so difficult in the different groups within the white sympathetic sphere to keep the crank out of just the club, I mean, and then what do you do once he's in the club or she's in the club? It becomes a problem just to get rid of them from the club. And so if they ended up being a neighbor or something, but it sounds like you have a pretty solid process in place and that people are made aware of what kind of behavior is going to be acceptable and unacceptable, and the consequences that they're going to could face if they break those rules. And I think that would probably also help with the self-selection and also you selecting people out that seem like they could end up being problematic once they're in the community. Now,
Right.
I understand you have, it's open to people who could be Christian, atheist, pagan. And so I wonder if you might speak on that for a moment, so people of faith or otherwise could have an insight.
Well, sure. First, I just want to add that it's really not up to me as an individual. We have a board of managers, and so most of these admissions decisions are made by the board. In exceptional cases, if someone was ousted, it would be a general vote. It's not like I'm the dictator of the community. I really have very few powers, as I'm the president of the PMA, but I don't have many abilities other than speaking on our behalf. As far as the religious question, yeah, we respect all traditional European faiths. If someone comes in and is Jewish or Muslim, well, that doesn't align with our purpose as a European Heritage Association. And so we would likely disqualify someone on that basis. Of course, I have to say that we make admissions decisions on a case-by-case basis. It's not simply if you belong to this race or religion, you're expelled, but obviously those criteria are strongly considered by the board members who individually on a case-by-case basis make those decisions. But yeah, I mean, we have Christians, we have pagans, we have Catholics, Eastern Orthodox, we have Christian identity folks. That's something I've become more interested in. I really wasn't too familiar with it before actually being there physically in the community, talking with our members who are into CI. There's a Christian Identity Church in Missouri about 4 hours away. I'm hoping to make the trek up there and learn more about it because it's pretty fascinating. But I was raised Catholic, more or less, until recently. I was the organist in my church.
Oh, wow.
But yeah, the Catholic Church, I personally have fallen away from because of its political stances. It basically openly supports mass migration into Europe and North America. So it's really hard to, have that be what you're entrusting the spiritual well-being of your children to, when, like, I was listening to an Indian priest. I was listening to a foreigner in an all-white area talking about how we ought to welcome in migrants. We ought to, give our resources to the third world and all of these things, which,
Oh my God.
it's just very discouraging. I still identify as a Christian myself, but I'm also very sympathetic to pagans. Kind of before my religious phase, I was already into philosophy and specifically Platonism. I still identify as a Platonist. And that is one thing that kind of undergirds both our Christian heritage as well as our pagan heritage. Obviously Plato was a pagan and the Neoplatonists were pagans. But the church fathers were typically Platonist in their metaphysics, in their philosophical categories that they used. So because I really lean into that undercurrent, we tend to gather, just because I'm the person speaking on our behalf, we gather pagans who lean in a Platonic way, sympathetic to Christians, and we gather Christians who lean sympathetic with traditional European religion. And I think there's something unhealthy about a really hardline fundamentalist attitude, and in a way that is unchristian. I mean, Jesus's message was to first and foremost have humility about whether you are in the right. You should act with compassion and, treat others how you want to be treated, and just like focus on your ethical conduct. Remove the splinter from your own eye before you try to remove the beam from your brother's eye. So, yeah, we tend not to attract really hardline fundamentalists, and I think that's for the best. So if you're a pagan that really hates Christians, you probably don't belong with us. If you're a Christian who really hates pagans, you probably don't belong with us. And I think overall, it's for the best.
Yeah, I do too. I mean, the focus being on our people, our well-being, and being able to overlook these differences for the deeper similarities. I mean, the way we come into this world is with our biospirit. And we are children of our Creator. We are exactly the way the Creator wanted us to be. And so clearly, that's what He wants us to give our allegiance, our faith, our loyalty to, first and foremost, and then achieving so much more by way of these other avenues and way of these other venues. I know we're running out of time with you for our first time together, but I wanted to ask about in these communities, are there any rules on firearm ownership and self-defense, and or is there any curtailment or any encouragement? Or please take it away.
Well, we don't train firearms together as an official activity of Return to the Land. We are very pro Second Amendment in general. We're in Arkansas, which is an open carry state. You don't really need a permit to have a handgun and things like that. And so a lot of members do have pistols and a whole armory of weapons very often. And sometimes they will open carry even in the community, although it's highly unnecessary. There's never been any situation even
Yeah.
remotely close to calling for that kind of violence. But yeah, no, we're very pro Second Amendment. I think if in the future anyone decided to give us trouble, it would be a very bad idea for them. I don't advocate violence, but I absolutely advocate being prepared to defend yourself if you had to.
Right. Right. And I think it's good to hear that you don't have some sort of weird like LARPing. We're trained, we get in the camo and then we go out into the woods and we train with our gun, because that's the exact kind of thing that is, first of all, it's LARPing, and it's not going to do you any good. Second of all, you're going to attract the attention of the feds, of the state government, the government in Arkansas there. They could end up coming down, and of course they would introduce you all to CPS and just any number of things. So, I mean, you sound like, and I'm so happy we talked and we had this connection here, because you are level-headed, clearly a really bright guy. You clearly have a plan laid out to achieve an outcome that will improve the lives of the white folk who get involved. And primarily, I think, not just obviously the parents, but the white children that are there. That's really the group that is targeted by anti-whiteism, and making them hate themselves, making them hate their parents. And we do need to be away from this anti-white world, and in every conceivable way. And this is one of them. I got more questions, but we'll have to bring you back, and that's not a problem at all. Really glad to make this initial contact with you and introduce you to the community. So let folks know where they can find you, where they can find out more about these white intentional communities that you are constructing here in the United States.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me on. I mean, I've wanted to speak with you for a long time. It's a shame we haven't been in contact already, really, but
Yeah.
it's never too late. So, no, I admire the work that you've been doing over the years, really standing behind your convictions. You can find us at returntotheland.org. The process to apply to become a member is very simple. It's just a $25 application fee. You fill out a questionnaire and then have a 15-minute interview, and then you'll have access to our Telegram groups. And there's a lot of very active discussion, sometimes on things like theology, and sometimes it gets a little bit heated. We have pagans, we have Christians and stuff, but it's generally very good spirited, and a good time. You can attend our events if you become a member. Generally, we have a big event in April and October every year. So yeah, that's the main platform. You can follow me on X _ Airvol, or rather at Airvol_, and then on YouTube, just search Airvol and you'll find it. Again, I make philosophy content, anthropology content. I recently made a video against the out of Africa theory. It was very data intensive and took a very long time to prepare. So yeah, I tend to be on the more intellectual side of things with my content, but I'm very open to average people, and I celebrate average white people and try to live for them and live for the kids. And really, ultimately, yeah, the community is absolutely all about the kids.
Oh man, that warms my heart, man. That's everything you're saying there is fantastic. And I'm gonna have to check that out. I remember years ago when the out of Africa argument really started getting pushed, and I pushed back with everything I could at the time. But of course, the anti-whites, they're in the universities, they're everywhere. And so slowly but surely, we saw more and more white people coming to the conclusion that, well, they're the original real people, and we're just like some offshoot. So yeah, I'm gonna definitely check that out as soon as I can, and I'm gonna put I got your YouTube in the description below. I'll add your Twitter there as well, folks. Everybody, follow Eric over there on both YouTube and Twitter. If it's okay if I call you by your first name, your real first name.
Yeah, absolutely.
Cool. And we'll have you back real soon, man. Great conversation. Is there anything else you wanted to share before we let you go today?
No, just again, appreciation to you for all the hard work you've been doing. Love your community. You don't deserve the criticism. You deserve more praise and respect for what you've been doing. So, and we all do. We should embrace that. We're the minority that actually is standing up for our people. In the past, that was a good thing without question. Of course, you stand up for your people, but now we're the few who are actually doing it. So, have some self-respect and keep fighting because we really need it.
Amen to that, brother. All right, man. We'll talk again real soon.